So I finally got a copy of Bellum. And I loaded in after the install, and something weird happened. I spawned in alone. Yep, in a rare instance for me in my entire history of gaming, Bellum let me walk the entire map all by my lonesome. The lobby was completely empty. No teammates, no enemies, no gunfire in the distance. Just me and this gigantic map. So instead of backing out, I figured, screw it. Let's take advantage of this. A rare chance to walk a battlefield without getting domed every 4 seconds. And honestly, seeing this map without the chaos tells you a lot about what Bellum is trying to be. Today we're taking an oh-so-quiet tour through the environment, the scale, the visuals, and what this map feels like when it's just you and the world. Now, before we hop in, here's the latest and greatest disclaimer for the new folks who decided to check out this video. I'm just some random dude on the internet that likes playing games and talking about them. Rage Slop is down the hall where the children hang out. I don't do that sort of nonsense. We're here for the vibe and having fun playing games. If you want to be angry about a stupid video game, you found the wrong channel and should probably evac now. Okay, here we go. Now, keep in mind, I'm going to be kind of all over the place here. Just try to keep up, okay? So, like I said, I landed in a completely empty lobby in Bellum. No gunfire. Well, that's not entirely true. There were 2 or 3 people in when I landed, so there was gunfire, just them shooting weapons, I suppose for testing and such. Anyway, no squads, no combat, just me and the most massive tactical map I've seen in quite a while. So instead of shrugging my shoulders and dipping out to try a different lobby, I figured I would take advantage of the quiet and take a silent tour, if you will, to see if the scale actually holds up. Now, walk with me, not only in the map, but for my regulars, my hood rats, I like to provide context when I talk about things. Some of the context is going to be about the comparisons and the contrasts. Some of the info will be a bit nerdy, but I'll try not to get too deep in the weeds. Okay, so we have another video game here showcasing the Unreal Engine 5 graphics. I had mentioned in a previous video about a game using the UE5, and there were a few eye-rolling comments. Not in the sense of, oh boy, here we go again, but from a, does it always have to be UE? Now, you guys got to take into consideration that the playing field, to coin a phrase, has flattened with technology and its access. In 2026, the gap between indie visuals and AAA visuals is basically gone. Engines like Unreal ship with photorealistic lighting, global illumination, PBR materials, and cinematic rendering right outside the box. The tech that used to require a 300-person studio and a proprietary engine is now available to a 12-person team with a good eye. The cost of high-demand visuals has technically collapsed, and the tools have been pretty much standardized. This is a huge reason why a small studio can drop an alpha that looks like it belongs on a blockbuster stage to give us the sheer distance between points of interest, colossal world building, and overall scalable graphics. A game like Grey Zone Warfare or Bellum, looking comparable to or even better than something like Battlefield 6 or Call of Duty, isn't about budget anymore. Engines like Unreal Engine 5 now handle a massive portion of what used to require entire teams. All the things that I just mentioned, high detail geometry, real-time lighting, and cinematic rendering are built into the engine. That means a smaller team can achieve visual results like what we're seeing here in this footage that a decade ago would have required AAA scale manpower. So this is a big reason why a lot of people are using it. On top of all that, indie developers are no longer building anything from scratch. High-quality asset libraries, photogrammetry, and third-party tools allow them to assemble environments using real-world scans and professionally built assets. Instead of dedicating months to create every tree, rock, or structure, teams can focus on placement, lighting, and refinement. The result is a faster pipeline that still produces top-tier visuals, because much of the foundational work was already done on a higher level. Years ago, you could do this on a more rudimentary scale, where we often found the same bush or tree copied and pasted into the landscape. Now, you can still do that, but make minor adjustments to what those trees look like, and so the copies tend to blend into the background scenery and they're less noticeable. Where things really start to diverge is in what each type of game is trying to accomplish. Games like, Gray Zone Warfare, Escape from Tarkov, or hell, even here in Bellum, developers can concentrate heavily on atmosphere, dense foliage, controlled environments, and lighting that sells realism. It doesn't have to consistently juggle massive scale chaos. Battlefield 6 and Call of Duty, for example, they're built around large player counts, vehicles, destruction systems, and fast-pacing engagements across expansive maps. That complexity pulls resources away from pure visual fidelity and towards systems that don't always show up in a still image, but are critical to how the game actually plays. AAA development also comes with constraints that smaller teams could just avoid. Large-scale titles need to run consistently across multiple platforms and hardware configurations while maintaining stable performances in unpredictable scenarios. That forces compromises. We've talked about this before. Indie projects can push visuals harder in specific situations, especially during alpha or beta phases, because they're not yet locked into the same level of optimization or broad compatibility. What players are often seeing is a highly polished slice of the experience rather than a full-scale, production-stable environment. Art direction plays a bigger role than most people give it credit for. A smaller team with a clear visual identity, strong lighting, cohesive color grading, and intentional environmental design, well, they could create a more convincing image than a larger team balancing competing priorities. When everything on the screen is aligned towards a single visual goal, the game can appear more realistic even if the underlying systems aren't that much more advanced. This allows for long-term open alphas and betas to live for months or years, like Gray Zone Warfare, and look good to play. This gives the developers time to work what players stress test. Gray Zone Warfare has been in pre-alpha for 2 years. You wouldn't necessarily notice that shit when playing it. The developers open it up so players can fuck around in it, stressing the game mechanics, and have things to shoot at while they work on improvements of the mechanics and gunplay. Each update is the result of feedback and player intel, so the game becomes more challenging with each update as the game mechanics evolve. It's a win-win for all involved. And honestly, more game studios should do this. Give players something to chew on while it's in development, share the journey, garner die-hard fans from the start, and have a great relationship between players and gaming studios. Hell, even hardware also shifts the equation. Modern GPUs allow developers to push significantly higher visual fidelity than in previous generations. And indie teams can lean into that by targeting higher-end systems first, whereas AAA did it second. AAA studios don't have that flexibility. They have to account for a wide range of hardware, which often means scaling visuals back to maintain consistency across the board. So the reality isn't that an indie game is outperforming a AAA title in graphics, it's just that each is allocating resources differently. Gray Zone Warfare or Bellum can afford to put a heavier emphasis on visual presentation in controlled conditions. Meanwhile, Battlefield 6 spreads its effort across visuals, gameplay systems, scale, and long-term stability. The difference you're seeing isn't just about quality. It's about where the developmental effort is being spent. So for those not in the know, the current state of Bellum is in a closed beta. In order to obtain access to it, you have to buy in with a purchase of either the deluxe edition or a higher version, unless you will have other means of gaining access. Community members are comparing it heavily to Armor Reforger and Squad, but they also are noting that Bellum focuses more on platoon-scale tactics. And the game takes place in a fractured Africa in the 2030s. So let me get some certain details out of the way. Bellum is not on Steam, at least for the time being. as to avoid Steam's 30% revenue cut, allowing funds to go directly into development. This business choice allows the devs to maintain control over the player experience. The developers are opting to host the game independently, managing their own community, and avoid early access review bombing. They do, however, have plans to potentially move to Steam later. Now, I know a lot of you out there are immediately turned away from PC games on independent launchers because Steam has that added layer of player protection, and I get it. I'm not suggesting in any way that you are wrong, but a lot of indie game studios do not include Steam for the reasons I just listed. Not always, but not because the game company doesn't care about you either. So this is intended to be a milsim PvP game, guys, and you will have limited respawns. Current cap is 3. There is currently a lack of magnified optics, which is currently a hot community topic. Right now, the game makes you use your eyes, not a 12x scope. I get that not having a 12x scope would be a bit frustrating to some, especially for a map this fucking big. So, I'm not dismissing it, but we'll see what they plan. Remember, folks, beta. Beta. And speaking of maps this size, the scale is just absurd and shouldn't be this in your face for an indie game. I mean, come on. Look at this shit. The first thing that hits you is the size of it all. This map isn't big, it's stupid big. You can walk for minutes at a time and still feel like you're nowhere near the center. And don't let that discourage you. This game isn't a walking simulator. I'm simply taking advantage of being in an empty lobby so we can see all the things. My next video on Bellum should have a lot more action, I promise. Come on, you got roads stretching out for forever, hills roll into more hills, buildings just aren't props, they're full clusters, little pockets of civilization, and little pockets of urban warfare death traps. Now, some rooms were rendered completely empty and lacked a lot of details, but I'm not worried about that right now. It's a beta. I suspect more details to flesh things out are coming. Dudes, this is the kind of map that's clearly built for large-scale engagement. Hood rat shit. Fuckery. Shenanigans. Not 6v6, not 12v12. I'm talking big player counts, room for vehicles when they finally get deployed into the game, long sightlines, and multiple simultaneous fights. It's not CQB. This is a place to have a slaughter. And being in here all by my lonesome, the scale of this area becomes almost surreal. Bellum's graphics hit a strange sweet spot. Not photorealistic, not stylized, but more grounded, at least in my opinion. The lighting is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. I would very much like to see this with weather variances in daytime versus nighttime. Got soft shadows, believable reflections, and a skybox that actually feels like weather, not a JPEG. Textures are just clean, even if there's some details missing. Foliage density is high without tanking the performance. And the sound design, even in an empty lobby, gives the map a sense of weight. Wind, distance ambience, environmental hum. I usually make a certain type of musical soundtrack for each game I cover, and I struggle to come up with one for this game. Walking through it alone almost feels like exploring a tech demo, but in a good way. Performance-wise, Bellum feels surprisingly stable. Sure, I'm by myself here in this footage, but watching others play it on their streams and uploads, I even noticed it then. No major stutters, no obvious pop-ins, and visibility at range is pretty solid. The important part? You can actually read silhouettes at a distance. That's a huge deal for a tactical shooter. Cover is pretty well placed, I think. Terrain has natural flow, and even without players, you can tell where the hot zones are probably going to be. The long roads, the elevated ridges, the tight urban pockets. Walking this map alone gives you an unexpected vibe. You can see the intent behind the design. There are sniper lanes that stretch forever, there are choke points that are going to be absolute meat grinders, and the open field that screams vehicles only. Bellum has plans to include transport and light armor vehicles later in the development. Right now, though, you're all on foot, my dudes. And there are little tucked away corners that are just perfect for flanks. You can almost imagine the chaos, even though it's dead silent right now. Exploring Bellum alone was not at all what I expected to do today, but honestly, it gave me a better first impression than any sweaty match could. The map is huge, the visuals are strong, the atmosphere is immersive, and the design feels intentional. If this is the playground, I want to see what happens when it's full. While we're walking around this empty map, checking out the graphics and scale of what you will expect if you jump into this game, there's some other angles to consider. Seeing this game and its potential, I want to talk about something a little bit more in general, as the topics have come up a lot since I started doing YouTube. This is a bit of the in the weeds, but it's that context I mentioned earlier. Folks, focus often beats money. AAA studios like DICE or Activision have to build everything at scale. Dozens of maps, hundreds of weapons, destruction systems, cinematics, multiplayer infrastructure, and in recent years, cross-platform support. Several of these indie teams don't. A small team could pour all their time into one island, one biome, one lighting model, and polish it until it gleams. That concentrated effort creates the illusion of AAA fidelity without AAA volume. When your scope is tight, your visuals could be razor sharp. And AAA studios are weighed down by process. Every artistic decision has to pass through producers, directors, marketing, legal, and shareholders. The almighty shareholders. Indies don't have that level of gravity to weigh them down. They can iterate shit faster, experiment more aggressively, and make bold artistic choices without a committee slowing them down. That freedom often results in visuals that feel more striking, more intentional, and more immersive than the safe realism AAA studios default to. Okay, now bear with me here. I do have a small amount of weeds here. Gonna use some big words I don't normally use in an everyday conversation, and yes, I did research this shit. Okay, here we go. Photogrammetry, megascans, procedural foliage, and AI-assisted workflows have changed the game. See? That wasn't so bad. Just a handful of tech words. Anywho, a tiny team could build a hyper-realistic environment without hiring 50 environmental artists. AAA studios use these tools too, but their scale multiplies cost and complexity. Indies can simply use the same tools without the overhead. The result is a small team producing visuals that look like they came from a massive art department. And speaking of gravity, AAA visuals aren't expensive because the art is hard. They're expensive because the pipeline is massive. Hundreds of artists needed to stay aligned. Every asset has to meet technical, performance, and marketing standards. The game has to run on multiple platforms, support massive player counts, and survive years of updates. That burden forces compromises. We've talked about that before as well. Indies don't carry that weight, so they can push fidelity in ways AAA teams can't normally justify. Players are increasingly drawn to games that feel consistent, immersive, and authentic. They're tired of technical issues, monetization creeps, and the live service tax that AAA games have often carried nowadays. Indie titles that focus on atmosphere, clarity, and immersion are thriving. When a game like Bellum or Gray Zone Warfare or even War Dogs shows up looking like a AAA title but plays like a focused, grounded experience, players have a tendency to notice this immediately. The visuals hit harder because the experience is tighter. Now, all this TED talk about the back end of shit is why I started to notice games like Escape from Tarkov, Gray Zone Warfare, Bellum, Piranha, and others. Not because they're tactical shooters or milsims or shit like that, because they look very cool to me. That's oftentimes how I'm convinced to try things. Guys, I'm not a hard person to please. If the game looks good, I'm gonna give it a spin. I've been around the block long enough, and I've seen some shit in my 5 decades. I've seen all the gimmicks, heard every single sales pitch known to man. So when I see an indie game look like this, I take notice and my interest is piqued. So I check them out. Bellum is not Gray Zone Warfare. They may look similar simply because both games are using the Unreal Engine 5. That doesn't mean they will play the same. I've been watching YouTube videos and streams of people playing both, and just by watching those, I can immediately tell the difference. They both scratch different itches. Look, Battlefield 6, Call of Duty, hell, even The Division. They all have money. So what are we talking about here, and would the conversation continue past this video upload? Well, Grayzone, Bellum, even Tarkov, they have focus. And right now, focus beats money. The tools that once required a massive studio are now in the hands of small teams with a very clear vision. AAA studios are fighting their own weight class. Indies are fighting gravity. That's how a tiny team can drop an alpha that looks like it belongs on the same shelf as Battlefield. Modern game development has seen a massive shift due to the standardization models of high-end tools, especially Unreal Engine 5. While AAA titles like Battlefield 6 operate with massive budgets, much of that capital is swallowed by massive staff overhead, global marketing, global reach, and the maintenance of proprietary engines like Frostbite. This is one of the biggest arguments I get into when I talk about Battlefield 6, is that everybody's like, well, they had, the biggest launch ever, they made a ton of money. Yeah, they also have a ton of bills. And that's what I just listed is a small list of some of the bills they got to pay. So sure, record profits, but record bills too. In contrast, a smaller indie team can leverage UE5's nanite and lumen technologies to handle complex geometry and dynamic lighting automatically without breaking much of a sweat or their bank account. This allows a handful of developers to achieve cinematic quality visuals, as you see here, that previously required hundreds of specialized artists, effectively closing the graphics gap through sheer technological efficiency. This is why one dude can make a video game. The visual parity is further fueled by the asset revolution, guys. Instead of spending years manually modeling every environmental detail from scratch, indie developers utilize photogrammetry. There's that big tech word again. Sorry, guys, I couldn't find a smaller word without adding 5 or 6 to describe it, and so that's why I made a card. And they also use libraries like Quixel Megascans. These are high-resolution, real-world scans of rocks, vegetation, and textures that could be dropped directly into the project. By kit-bashing these hyper-realistic assets, an indie studio can focus their limited resources on art direction and atmosphere, such as the gritty, humid, and lived-in look seen in games like Bellum or Grayzone Warfare, rather than basic asset creation. And really, indie developers benefit from a lack of legacy constraints and the technical debt that the establishment has had and continues to carry. Large AAA franchises are often forced into cross-generational development, meaning their graphics are intentionally throttled to ensure the game runs on older consoles. At least that's how it was. Recently, these AAA studios stopped supporting previous-gen consoles. This was one of the big issues Battlefield 4 faced at launch that contributed to its disastrous launch. When Battlefield 4 launched, we were in the middle of the transition from the PS3 into the PS4, and DICE had to accommodate both systems. Plus, PC was evolving as well. Bigger, better, and stronger and faster processors and GPUs. A specialized indie tactical shooter can target high-end PC hardware exclusively, pushing the graphical sliders to the limit without compromise. By prioritizing a specific aesthetic of realism and grit over the cleaner, more reliable look required for mass market appeal, these smaller teams can deliver an experience that actually feels more visually immersive and impressive than its billion-dollar competitors. And that fast-tracks often to console platforms. There's a ton of indie games exclusive to PC and some exclusive to console, but that gap separation is getting smaller and smaller. Grayzone Warfare has console plans. War Dogs has not outright dismissed the idea, but it wasn't rejected either for possible future deployment. Bellum is brand new and thoughts of console inclusion or even crossplay might not be on the table yet. And I stress the word yet. They have plans to bring it to console. Part of the evolution of it's not just technology, but the game development in general, PC and console. Unfortunately, bigger gaming companies like EA or Bethesda or Activision have such a revolving door with employees and projects. Indie developers are small compared to big companies, so circling back to the overhead and hardware, they could simply use UE5 and not have to worry about a high turnover once the game launches and it opens the door for multiple platforms. They would have a smoother and easier time to maintain the game's lifecycle and platform development, and then pivot to their next project without the need of hundreds of employees and the headaches that come with it. And part of me thinks EA or Activision or whatever big game company that went through the 80s, 90s, and up to today simply cannot adapt the indie model for logistic reasons and stay relevant. I think we're in this weird dichotomy of indie versus establishment for the foreseeable future, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. You got the old timers, EA, Bethesda, Activision, and to some extent Ubisoft and others, and they went through the evolution of game development, both the good and the bad. And now you have the red hats, so to speak. Small gamers and developers coming in hot and fresh, using the evolved tech built before them and immediately competing against the old-timers. I think this will be a fresh and new way to make the old-timers take notice and adjust fire, especially if they want to remain in the ecosystem. My only concern is that indies could potentially end up like the old-timers, and none of us really want that. So, do we think indies can truly compete directly with AAA companies? Can they literally be all up in their faces with their projects and wave their success to the old-timers' faces? Well, yeah. I think indies can compete. Given time, I think they're going to be right there in the mix. And honestly, that's not even the interesting part anymore. The interesting part is this. What happens when these games actually hold up? Because walking this map alone, that's one thing. Seeing the scale, the lighting, the design, that's the easy version. The real test is when things fill up, when players start pushing these lanes, when the chaos hits, and when the map actually has to perform under pressure. That's where Bellum either works or completely falls apart. And yeah, I'm not done with this yet, because now I want to see it under stress. Bellum, War Dogs, Gray Zone Warfare, these aren't just one-off conversations for me. There's a lot here, and we've got plenty to chew on. I am all for this game to succeed and bring us more shenanigans and tomfoolery. It shows massive promise, and I'm here for that. What do you think, though? We need thoughts and opinions, folks, and you know what that means. We start the conversation here and take it to the comments section for further discussion. And speaking of comments, I get this game or its current state may not be your jam. Those opinions are welcome and they are valid. What isn't, though, is the name calling because someone asked a question or someone's take isn't in line with yours. I'm starting to see this more and more. If you cannot adult up in here, I will kick the comment. Fuckers, be nice. Don't be an asshole. I have been soft pimping the plugs based on some experiments here. I'm in the YouTube Creator Community Program now, and it's all the focus is all about the plugs and value exchanges in the content. Yes, it's all about making money. I'm all about making money. But I'm not about to, please give me your hard-earned cash because you obviously don't need it, right? So here's the gist of my take on the plugs. Yes, I have them. A merch store for hood rat gear, memberships for monthly support, third-party donation sites like Cash App, a Twitch page where I haven't streamed for a while, but working on plans to return. There's an X profile. And we're on Discord, which is where I want those who like hanging out and playing games with others to eventually land in. There you can hang out with us, communicate in-game, and hear hot takes on shit like why I think David Gilmour is a way, way, way better guitarist than Eric Clapton. And no, I'm not sorry at all that I feel that way. So yes, I have plugs. I assume 99% of my audience out there are above average intelligence and know where plugs live and know how and when to spend their money if they so choose to do so. We also have friends of the channel. other content creators who are also subscribers and content creators who are with me building this neighborhood. If this content vibes with you, see if theirs does too. If you are a content creator and want to be part of this neighborhood, reach out and we'll iron out the details. So yes, plugs, socials, the works, like a standard, normal channel works. But lastly, and most importantly, please take a moment to check out this month's Veteran Spotlight Military OneSource. Details are at the very bottom of the video's description with a quick bio of their mission and a link. Please support our troops and their families. That part I won't mind asking for of your time or donations. And even though you don't need a reminder, it's fucking Friday. End your shift, drive home safely, and maybe we'll see each other in the games we play. Until next time, though, out.